Greetings. We are continuing with this video thinking about the issue of market failure. And for us, market failure comes from a variety of reasons. We've already pretty extensively looked at what happens when we have information issues. Now I want to introduce something called an externality. It's got kind of a long definition, but I wrote it out because it's important to get this down. An externality is a cost or benefit imposed on others without economic implications on the agent making the decision. Essentially, an externality is when your behavior impacts me, but you don't feel it, okay? Sometimes some people call this spillover effects. When we did the videos on cost theory, I said, economists, the most important thing about the cost curves that economists like is the marginal cost curve, and I pointed out that, some people call that by a different name. Wall Street Journal likes to call that incremental cost. It's the cost for an incremental unit of production, okay? That's fine. In this case, some people call this spillover effects, but economists stick to this phrase externalities. Externalities are when one economic agent's behavior has impacts on other people that has no economic impact on the person who actually made the decision. The behavior of one person to do something that they like actually impacts other people, but it makes that makes no impact on the person making the decision. Okay? So we're going to think long and hard about this, and so we're going to start by thinking up two types of externalities. And the two types of externalities are negative externalities, and the other is a positive externality. The economists divide externalities into two different classes. One's called a negative externality and one's called a positive externality. I think they're pretty straightforward, but let's talk them through. The first one, which is a negative externality, is when your behavior, whatever you're doing, has, let's say, negative impacts on somebody else that don't really cost you anything. Okay? So this could be lots of things. If you live in an apartment building, and you're trying to get some sleep the night before an exam, and all of a sudden your next door neighbor comes home at 2:30 in the morning and starts playing their stereo at volume levels you can't stand, and your walls are shaking. Now that person is doing that not because he or she doesn't like you, it's because they like their music loud and they probably had a little bit too much to drink. But it's impacting you in a very negative way. It's hard for you to sleep. You want to get that is definitely a classic example of a negative externality. Another one is when you see people, airports every now and then add a new runway. O'Hare added the new runway recently. I don't know, it was a few years ago. O'Hare added a new runway, and the runway brought planes in from a different direction. And when those planes come in from a different direction, they actually go over a housing subdivision that suddenly everything has changed, okay? And so they would talk about this in the newspapers and say that, owners would say that the planes come in so low that sometimes shingles are torn off their roof and that their china shakes on the wall in their hutch cabinet. And that is a negative externality. I mean, it's true that they needed the new runway at O'Hare, and it's true that planes make a lot of noise. But what happens here is that these people, their life, their housing, they're trying to sell their house. The housing values went down. According to realtors, housing values went down in that area. So even if you tried to move out, you're going to take a beating on those houses. That's a negative externality. The impact of the decision by O'Hare to relocate a runway in different airspace that has different airspace really hurt those people in that area, and they're not really being compensated. How about positive externality? Well, positive externality is the opposite. Positive externality is when your particular behavior actually has spillover positive effects for somebody else. Okay? So examples of that, not as many, but there are some simple examples. It's not uncommon to see people who have orchards locating close to people who have honeybee farms. People who have a vast honeybee setup usually locate near orchards because both of those, the honeybees being pollinators, help the orchard, okay? But that also allows the honeybee producer to make more honey. That is a positive impact on the orchard because the orchards need pollinators and the idea of having a big honeybees there. So there's this joint relationship where they're helping each other out, even though they're not paying each other for that service. A much better one to think about, well, I think it's clear, is to think about landscaping. Suppose I was going to build. My wife and I decided we're going to landscape our house. We go and we talk to a landscape architect. The landscape architect comes back and gives us 5 different estimates. This one, 2,000, here's what it'll look like. 5,000, here's what it'll look like. 10,000, here's what it'll look like. 15,000, here's what it'll look like. And for 25,000, you could have a showpiece. Okay, this would just be amazing. So my wife and I sit there and we think, well, now it turns out one of the most robust findings we have in real estate markets is that when you do landscaping in your house, guess whose other houses value? The people whose houses are beside you get a big boost. If you landscape your house up really nice, the person to your immediate left and immediate right, their housing values takes a big bump. No kidding. I mean, the data is pretty rock solid on this. In fact, the people 2 doors down also take a bump, not so big, and 3 doors down. After that, it's not statistically significant that it's going to make that big of a difference. But the point is clear. If you do a good job of landscaping, your neighborhood is going to be better, and your approximate neighbors are going to be very happy. So now, my wife and I are looking at these bids, and we're saying, well, we got these kids in college, we have to do this, we got to do that. I think, what we're going to do is we'll probably just take this $10,000 one. And the neighbors go, oh, it would be great. It would be a lot better if you did that. And in fact, I look at them and I say, well, are you going to help pay me? Well, no, but I mean, your house would look so much nicer. And clearly it would. And here's the point. The benevolent dictator, if they could somehow walk into this thing, they could point out to me, hey, the pie, you're making the size of the pie bigger for you. You're making your bigger, but you're missing out. If you just did a little bit more, your neighbor's pies are going to grow up like this. So you're shortchanging your neighbors. And I say, tough. But the benevolent dictator doesn't like that, right? The benevolent dictator just wants to maximize the size of the pie. But because I don't take any of my neighbors' value functions into consideration when I pick my landscaping, I under-landscape. I under-choose my landscaping. Well, that's why you see sometimes some communities will have programs where, in fact, if you do X, Y, Z, for every dollar you spend on X, we'll give you 50 cents. Because we really want to make our town look better, and I'll climb on the rankings of those surveys you see about America's top 100 communities, and that would be something that might be good for us. Positive externalities, however, it's true they're good. My neighbors will get a spillover effect. They're just not getting as much as the benevolent dictator would like. That's a problem. Okay.